This alien revealed a secret about Jesus and the Anunnaki that humanity was never supposed to know, and the moment I heard it, the sky above the desert tore open like something ancient was waking up. A presence stepped through the light. Not human, not divine, but something older than both, and it whispered a truth that could tear history apart. If what it showed me is real, every story we've ever been taught about creation, destiny, and who we really are has been deliberately rewritten. Before we dive into this revelation, like this video, share it with someone who still thinks we're alone, and don't forget to subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Now ease back and let your mind open, because what happened next is where the real story begins. The night did not begin with a warning. It began with a vibration. A low, trembling hum beneath the desert floor that Dwayne first mistook for distant machinery or wind trapped between the dunes. But when the ground pulsed a second time, harder, like something beneath the earth was breathing, he knew it was neither. He stood among the broken walls of an ancient monastery swallowed by sand, a place abandoned for more than 1,000 years, and for reasons he could not explain, he felt he was meant to be there. The stars above him shimmered strangely, as if the sky were a thin sheet of glass and someone was pressing against it from the other side. Constellations flickered, lines bent. The air thickened until every breath felt like pulling smoke through water. Something was coming, something the world would never be ready to see. The third pulse struck so violently that Dwayne fell to one knee. The sand around him rose in a circle, lifting into a swirling column even though no wind touched his skin. The temperature dropped instantly. A faint glow began beneath the ground, a pale white radiance bleeding upward through the cracks like moonlight forced through stone. The ruins vibrated, the air trembled, and then the earth split open. A beam of white and gold light surged upward with such intensity that it erased the shadows around him. The column stretched so high that Dwayne could not see where it ended. He shielded his face, but even with his eyes closed, he saw it, a brightness that burned behind his eyelids as though it were shining inside his skull. The entire desert seemed to hold its breath. Then came the sound. Not thunder, not an explosion. It was a tearing, a slow, impossibly deep rip that felt like the sky itself was being pulled apart seam by seam. The stars above warped into spirals. The darkness between them cracked open like shattered glass. And from the heart of the light, something stepped forward. Its form emerged first as a silhouette, tall and impossibly slender, the edges of its body bleeding into the light as if it were carved from the beam itself. As it moved, the glow dimmed enough for Dwayne to see it clearly. And the moment he did, every instinct in his body screamed that this was not a creature born of earth. Its skin shimmered like translucent crystal. Its eyes glowed a silver so bright they seemed to see through him, into him, past him. The presence radiated intelligence, age, something ancient enough to make time itself feel young. And though its mouth never moved, a voice bloomed inside Dwayne's mind, clear and resonant, as if spoken through his bones. You were never meant to know this. The sky above split once more, sending a crack of white fire across the heavens. The light thickened around the being until it almost pulsed like a living thing. Dwayne could not move, could not breathe, could not understand how his mind had not collapsed under the weight of whatever stood before him. Then the voice came again, deeper, older. Jesus was not who you believe he was, and the Anunnaki were never your gods. What comes next will break the story of your world. The desert fell silent. The light dimmed, and Dwayne realized that whatever this being came to reveal was a truth humanity was never supposed to hear. The silence after the light faded was more terrifying than the eruption itself. It was not the silence of night or wind or empty desert. It was a silence that felt engineered, deliberate, as if even the air had been instructed not to move. Dwayne stood in the deep stillness, the afterimage of the column of light still burning behind his eyes, unsure if the world around him was returning to normal or preparing for something worse. The desert floor felt warmer now, almost alive beneath his boots. The ruined monastery around him seemed changed, its shadows stretched in unnatural directions, its stones darker than before. The sky overhead still looked wrong, the stars drifting in patterns that did not belong to any map. It reminded him of a broken compass spinning without north. Everything familiar had shifted by a fraction, yet the shift carried the weight of a catastrophe. A faint hum lingered in the air like an echo trapped inside a cave. It pulsed in slow, steady intervals, not quite sound and not quite vibration. Dwayne realized that the hum was not fading. It was adjusting, reorganizing, as if the desert were recalibrating itself around whatever had just happened. He inhaled, and the air tasted metallic, laced with an unfamiliar sweetness that clung to the back of his throat. Before the being in the light appeared, Dwayne had felt only a strange pull, a silent summons. Now he understood that the pull had not come from instinct or curiosity. It had been guided. Something had led him to that exact point on that exact night, and the realization settled into him with a cold certainty he could not shake. He looked at the ground where the light had erupted. The sand there was fused into glass. A perfect circle of white and gold crystallized in the center of the ruins. The glass pulsed faintly, the same rhythm as the hum in the air. When he stepped closer, his reflection warped in its surface, bending like liquid. A heat rose from it, warm but not uncomfortable, almost inviting in a way that felt wrong. When the voice returned, it did not come with light or sound. It simply formed inside him, as clear as his own thoughts, yet undeniably foreign. It carried weight, age, purpose. Do not fear what you have seen. Fear only what remains hidden. The presence behind the voice lingered in the air like an invisible tide pressing outward from the cracked sky. Dwayne felt it circling him, examining him, as if measuring something within him that he could not perceive. He tried to look up at the stars again, but they were still shifting, sliding across the sky in slow, unnatural spirals. A thin streak of pale blue light ran between two constellations that should never have touched. For a moment he wondered if he was hallucinating, if the blast of brightness had burned his vision or fractured his mind. But the hum beneath his feet insisted otherwise. The fused glass still pulsed. The air still tasted like metal and ash. The world had changed, and it was not done changing. The presence within his mind stirred once more. "You felt the stirring long before you arrived," it whispered. "You sensed the call. Only a few can hear it. Fewer still follow it. But you did." The words sank like lead into Dwayne's chest. They were not praise, not comfort. They were confirmation of a fate he had not chosen. The ruins around him seemed to breathe as the desert wind slowly returned. Sand shifted. Broken stones groaned. The monastery's fractured archway cast a shadow shaped like an open eye. "Some truths," the voice murmured, "do not wait to be found. They seek those capable of surviving them." A chill moved down his spine as he realized something profound and terrifying. The being had not appeared because he was nearby. It had appeared because it needed him. The glow that lingered after the entity's arrival had not vanished entirely. It hovered faintly in the air, a pale residue of something that did not belong to Earth. Dwayne stood at the edge of the fused glass circle, knowing instinctively that crossing it would change far more than the ground beneath his feet. Every instinct warned him to step back. Yet an even deeper impulse urged him to stay, as though he had already crossed an invisible threshold long before arriving at the ruins. The air vibrated softly, carrying a whisper of the impossible figure he had seen. Even though the being was no longer visible, its presence did not diminish. It felt as though it occupied the space between heartbeats, waiting for something to align. Dwayne sensed no hostility, but neither did he feel safety. It was the sensation of standing before a force too vast to categorize, too ancient to challenge. The ground beneath him trembled, not with violence, but with intention. A low resonance spread outward from the center of the glass circle, forming ripples that loosened the sand around the ruins. Dwayne could not help staring into the shimmering surface, where faint patterns flickered beneath the glass as if something were moving inside it. The shapes pulsed in deliberate rhythms, never repeating, never constant, almost like symbols struggling to surface. The voice returned without warning, entering his mind with the clarity of a thought that was not his. It carried no emotion, only certainty. You stand at the breach because you were permitted to. The words sent a shiver through him. They implied boundaries, rules, beings who enforced them. Dwayne looked at the sky, still fractured by faint threads of pale blue light that stretched between drifting constellations. Whatever had entered the world had not done so casually. It had pushed through something that was meant to stay sealed. A gust of cold air swept through the ruins, strong enough to scatter sand across the glass circle. Yet the moment the grains touched the surface, they dissolved into light and vanished. Dwayne stepped back in shock. The glass was not glass. It was something alive. Something processing everything that entered its perimeter. The presence spoke again, its words vibrating through his bones. The form you witnessed is no apparition. It belongs to a witness of ages, one who walks between worlds to observe the rise and fall of consciousness. The title echoed in his mind with a weight he did not understand. A witness of ages, a being older than written language, older than every myth humanity had ever told, and it had stepped into his world for him. The ruins felt smaller now, as if the desert itself had tightened its grip around the monastery. Dwayne sensed the presence circling him, studying him from angles that did not exist in the physical world. It was not watching with eyes. It was sensing with something older. Something that reached into the marrow of his thoughts. The air thickened, pulling at the edges of his awareness until he felt as if he were standing on the threshold of sleep and waking, suspended between two realities. A subtle warmth spread across his spine, neither comforting nor painful, but unmistakably deliberate. It carried a message without words, a recognition that made Dwayne realize the being had not chosen him randomly. He felt it reading the parts of him he rarely confronted, the inner corridors of doubt, belief, memory, and the quiet parts of his life where questions had always lived without answers. The presence pressed gently against these spaces, testing their strength, measuring their capacity. The voice drifted into his mind with a calm that felt almost surgical. You were chosen because you are unclaimed. The message settled like a stone dropped into deep water. Unclaimed. It was a word heavy with meaning, yet no explanation followed. Dwayne felt as if the being expected him to understand without being told. He thought of his life. He thought of how he had never aligned himself with a faith, a doctrine, or an ideology. He had always hovered at the edges, searching for something he could not define but had always felt, something just beyond reach. The presence stirred again. Neither belief nor denial binds you. You stand between. The desert wind rose in a sudden gust, whipping sand into the air. The sound echoed strangely, as if traveling through hollow stone. The ruins shifted under the pressure, old stones groaning like ancient lungs drawing breath for the first time in centuries. Dwayne wrapped his arms around himself as the chill deepened, but the cold did not come from the night. It came from understanding. The being had not chosen him because he was strong or wise or exceptional. It had chosen him because he was empty enough for truth to enter. The fused circle beneath him pulsed once more, brighter than before. The shimmering patterns beneath its surface aligned into a single form for a fleeting moment, a symbol so intricate that his mind could not hold it. It vanished before he could comprehend it fully, leaving only a lingering impression of something sacred yet forbidden. The voice filled him again, quieter than before but carrying the gravity of prophecy. A vessel that is already full cannot receive. You were selected because your mind remains open, untouched by the chains that bind others. As the last word faded, the desert fell still again, and Dwayne understood with absolute clarity that his life had been leading to this moment long before he ever stepped into the ruins. The glow beneath the fused circle deepened, shifting from pale gold to a muted blue that pulsed in slow, deliberate intervals. Dwayne watched as the patterns beneath the surface rearranged themselves like a living tapestry, weaving and unweaving its own meaning. The desert around him felt older than moments before, as if the arrival of the being had awakened an age buried under centuries of silence. Every instinct urged him to step back, yet his feet refused to move, anchored by something deeper than curiosity. A heaviness settled in the air, not oppressive, but ancient, like the weight of a forgotten memory pressing against his consciousness. The presence drifted closer, not physically but through the subtle distortion of the atmosphere, bending the edges of sound and light around him. It felt like standing on the brink of an immense revelation, one that hovered just outside the reach of human comprehension. The voice entered his mind with deliberate slowness, each word carrying a resonance that vibrated through his bones. Humanity's beginning was not an accident. The sentence echoed inside him long after the sound faded. The desert wind paused. The stars seemed to hold still. Dwayne felt a hollow cold settle in his stomach as the meaning unfurled. The presence pressed deeper, peeling back the veil of his thoughts as if searching for any resistance. Finding none, it continued. Your kind was shaped. The words felt too large, too immense to belong within a human mind. Images flickered at the edge of Dwayne's vision, not clear enough to decipher but unmistakably ancient. Towers of obsidian rising under a blood-red sky. Figures with elongated limbs moving through corridors of impossible architecture. Symbols etched into stone older than recorded history. Each image vanished before he could grasp it, leaving only the echo of something engineered far beyond human capacity. You were not created as you believe. The presence intensified, the tone neither accusatory nor consoling, but factual in a way that left no room for doubt. The sand around the fused circle shifted, forming spiral patterns as if responding to the voice. Dwayne felt his heartbeat slow, not from fear but from a strange, compelling clarity. The truth being delivered was not meant to terrify. It was meant to dismantle. Before your civilizations rose, before your gods were named, before your stories were told, there were the ones who designed you. The desert seemed to exhale, releasing a gust of wind that swept through the ruins like a whispered warning. Dwayne's mind struggled to reconcile the words with everything he had ever known. Yet the presence spoke with such absolute certainty that denial felt impossible. The first manipulation of your kind began when Earth was still young, not as myth, not as legend, but as design. The final word resonated like a key turning in a lock, and Dwayne understood that whatever came next would rewrite every truth humanity had ever believed about its own beginning. The desert air thickened until it felt like Dwayne was standing underwater, each breath dragging through a veil of unseen substance. The presence deepened, expanding around him until the ruins seemed to shrink beneath its vastness. The fused circle beneath his feet glowed brighter, shifting to a deep indigo that pulsed with a rhythm not connected to anything earthly. Dwayne sensed the voice preparing to reveal something heavier than everything that had come before. The first intervention was only the beginning. The words unfurled inside him like smoke, ancient and deliberate. Dwayne felt an ache behind his eyes as fragmented images flickered through his mind. None were clear, yet all felt undeniably real. A sky filled with twin moons, a landscape shaped by towering machines, beings with luminous bodies working in silence. It was not Earth. It was not human. From their design came intention. The atmosphere around him vibrated, creating a faint ringing in his ears. The presence continued, neither rushed nor hesitant, but steady, as though revealing a truth long overdue. Among those who shaped you stood one they could not bind. The moment the words formed, the indigo light beneath Dwayne's feet flared as though reacting to the statement. A warmth spread through his chest, not painful but overwhelming, as if a forgotten memory was stirring in his blood. He arrived outside their calculations. Dwayne's breath caught. The images in his mind shifted. He saw a silhouette standing against a horizon of swirling gold, a presence that radiated a gentleness unlike anything he had felt before. It was only a shadow, but it carried a gravity that resonated through him. His consciousness did not originate from their design. The desert wind rose and then fell again, as if bowing to a name that had not yet been spoken. They could not restrain him. They could not influence him. They could not alter the frequency he carried. The pulsing indigo beneath Dwayne's feet brightened once more, illuminating the ruins in ghostly blues. The one you call Yeshua was an anomaly, a disruption to their structure, a presence beyond their architecture. A silence followed, vast and trembling, as if the world itself understood the weight of what had just been spoken. The wind shifted as though the desert itself were listening, carrying grains of sand that glimmered faintly in the unnatural light rising from the fused circle. Dwayne felt the presence around him tighten, not in threat but in precision, as if the being was guiding his mind toward a single inevitable realization. The air pulsed with a low frequency that vibrated through the stones, the dunes, even the sky itself. Yeshua did not emerge from their lineage. The words settled into him like falling embers, soft yet scorching. Dwayne's thoughts scattered, reaching for interpretations he had never allowed himself to consider. For a moment he wondered if the images flickering around him were memories or projections. He saw flashes of a boy standing on a hillside, light gathering around him in gentle waves. He saw a young man walking alone through deserts that were not made of earth's sand. He was not sent by those who shaped you. A strange calm washed over Dwayne, though nothing about the revelation felt gentle. It felt like the slow opening of a hidden vault, the unraveling of a truth humanity was never meant to hold. The presence pressed closer, folding around Dwayne like a cocoon of unseen threads. He came from beyond their dominion. The ground beneath him pulsed again. This time the light shifted to a pale violet, humming with a resonance that made Dwayne's bones feel hollow. The presence moved within the pulse, as if the light itself carried fragments of its consciousness. He interfered. Dwayne's breath caught. The simplicity of the word made the weight behind it even more immense. He saw deeper images now. Yeshua standing before structures carved from stone that predated history. Yeshua touching the forehead of a man, and a burst of light spreading outward. Yeshua lifting his eyes toward the sky as if speaking to something unseen, something far beyond the reach of the world around him. He brought a frequency they could not suppress. The ruins groaned softly, as if reacting to the word frequency. The stars above shifted position again, sliding into new patterns that resonated faintly with the pulsing light beneath Dwayne's feet. Where they built boundaries, he opened gates. Where they installed control, he ignited memory. His presence disrupted every design they placed upon your kind. The final sentence echoed through the desert, leaving the air trembling as though it, too, had been altered by the truth. The violet glow beneath Dwayne's feet deepened until it resembled a pool of liquid light, its slow movement mirroring the rhythm of a great unseen heart. The presence drifted closer, its awareness expanding through the ruins like smoke, infiltrating the cracks of an ancient structure. Dwayne felt as though he stood inside a living memory, one unfolding directly into his mind. There was a lineage they feared. The words pressed gently against his thoughts, and immediately his vision blurred. Not with darkness, but with fragments of something older than scripture. He saw threads of light weaving through generations, passing silently from mother to child, father to child, carrying something concealed yet powerful. It was not blood. It was not genetics. It was a resonance traveling through time as though it had its own will. The anomaly did not begin with him. Dwayne felt warmth gather in his chest, expanding outward in waves that matched the pulsing circle beneath him. The presence guided his awareness deeper, revealing glimpses of ancient faces turned toward the sky. Some appeared human, others slightly different, as if shaped by hands that understood the blueprint of humanity better than humanity itself. Each of them carried a faint glow in their eyes, a luminous imprint that set them apart. They carried awareness beyond the design. The air thickened. The desert fell eerily still, losing even the faint rustle of sand shifting in the night breeze. Dwayne felt pressure behind his temples, as though the presence were opening a door inside him. He saw a young woman standing near a well, her hands glowing faintly as she lifted water. He saw a child laughing beside an elder whose gaze shone with a silent, knowing light. He saw a man walking alone through a barren valley, his shadow stretching impossibly far. It was a frequency, not a bloodline. The presence's voice deepened, carrying layers of meaning that brushed against Dwayne's understanding without fully landing. He felt as if he were being shown only the edges of a vast truth, the full shape too overwhelming for a single moment. They feared the lineage because its resonance existed outside their parameters, a thread untouched by their manipulation, a spark that could ignite remembrance in all of humanity. The sand around the fused circle shifted, forming patterns that glowed faintly in the violet light, as if the desert itself responded to the revelation. From this lineage came the one they could not control. The desert seemed to fold in on itself as the violet glow dimmed into a deeper shade, almost indigo, pulsing like a heartbeat buried beneath centuries of sand. Dwayne felt a subtle pulling sensation, not outward but inward, as if the presence were guiding his awareness into a corridor of memory that did not belong to him. The air thickened again, rippling with a quiet force that blurred the boundary between the physical and the unseen. What you call missing years were never missing. The words echoed through him with a certainty that erased every doubt before it could form. Images flickered at the edges of his vision, hazy at first, then sharper, as if something were adjusting the focus of reality itself. He saw a figure walking through a desert much older than the one he stood in, a desert under a sky filled with stars that did not belong to Earth. The sand glowed faintly beneath the traveler's feet, reacting to his presence as though recognizing him. He walked the places where boundaries were thin. The ruins around Dwayne vibrated softly, stone dust drifting upward, as if gravity itself wavered. The presence pushed gently against his mind, opening the door wider. He saw the traveler among mountains carved with symbols older than any civilization known to history. He stood inside a cavern, lit by floating shards of blue light. He entered structures carved from stone so precise they looked grown rather than built. He sought those who were not human. Dwayne's breath halted. The images sharpened. Tall, luminous beings surrounded the traveler, their forms shifting between solidity and light. They did not speak with mouths. They communicated with currents of energy that flowed directly into the traveler's awareness. There was no fear, no hesitation. The traveler stood among them as if among old companions. He learned from civilizations that existed before your recorded time. The sky above Dwayne shimmered as if responding to the memory. The constellations bent slightly, forming patterns faintly resembling the symbols carved into the mountains he had witnessed. The presence pressed closer, surrounding him like a vast but gentle tide. He learned what they tried to erase from your kind. He learned the architecture of consciousness. He learned the truth of your origin and the power that had been removed from you. Dwayne felt the ground pulse once more, and with it came the realization that the missing years were not a mystery. They were a threat the world was never meant to uncover. The indigo glow beneath Dwayne softened into a pale silver, shimmering like moonlit water disturbed by an unseen current. The shift in color felt intentional, as if the presence were preparing his mind for something far more delicate than anything revealed before. The desert held its breath again, the ruins silent, the wind absent, as though the world itself understood the gravity of what was coming. There were teachings he shared that never reached your world. The words descended gently, yet carried a weight that resonated through Dwayne's ribcage. His vision clouded, not with darkness but with shifting layers of light, each one unfurling into images that flickered like memories half remembered. He saw the traveler seated on the ground with a small group around him. Their faces were veiled with shadow, but their eyes glowed with the same silver light that pulsed beneath Dwayne's feet. The teachings were not meant for the masses. The images expanded. He saw the traveler drawing symbols into sand that shimmered faintly as if the earth itself understood them. He saw hands touching hands, light passing from one to another like a silent exchange of understanding. He saw the traveler lifting his gaze toward a horizon where a vast, luminous structure flickered between visibility and invisibility. They were keys. Dwayne felt a strange tingling across his fingertips, as though the memory were reaching through time to touch him. The presence pressed closer, and the images sharpened. The keys were not objects. They were methods, principles, frequencies, ways of unlocking dormant capacities buried deep within human consciousness. They taught how to hear the truth beneath words. He saw one of the followers touch the traveler's arm, and instantly the desert around them fell away. They stood inside a space made of shifting geometric light, where thoughts had form and emotion shaped the air. Another follower stepped forward and dissolved into a field of gentle gold, their shape reforming with newfound clarity. They taught how to remember what had been taken from your kind. The ruins around Dwayne vibrated subtly, as if echoing the energy of the teachings being unveiled. The presence enveloped him completely now, its voice softer, almost reverent. These 7 teachings were the core of what he brought. Not doctrine, not worship. Awakening. The silver beneath Dwayne glowed brighter, and that is why they were erased. The silver glow beneath Dwayne shifted again, darkening into a cool blue that pulsed like a distant star, struggling to remain visible. The presence around him grew heavier, not oppressive but profound, as though it were preparing to unveil a layer of truth that required both precision and restraint. The desert air crackled faintly, the sound so soft it resembled static drifting through the atmosphere. The things he performed were not miracles. The words entered Dwayne's mind with an icy clarity that made the hair along his arms rise. Before he could even process them, images began to emerge, slow at first, then sharper as though the world around him were adjusting its lens. He saw the traveler again, standing beside a man whose body trembled with illness. The traveler placed a hand near him, not touching, merely hovering. Light radiated from the traveler's palm, soft but undeniably alive. The trembling ceased. The man rose. It was memory, not magic. The message reverberated through Dwayne's thoughts with a weight he could not shake. The scene shifted. Now the traveler walked across a vast plain where a group of people followed him at a distance. A storm had formed overhead, lightning carving patterns through a churning sky. The traveler lifted his gaze, and the storm bent around him as though recognizing an embedded command. Rain fell everywhere except where he stood. He altered frequency. Dwayne felt the presence guiding him deeper, pressing gently against the edges of his perception. Another scene unfolded. The traveler sat beside a child whose breathing was shallow and fading. With a whisper of light, the child's chest expanded. Then again, stronger, until he breathed as if reborn. He remembered the original design. The ruins vibrated, stone dust lifting into the air as if gravity had loosened its grip. Dwayne's chest tightened with the understanding that bloomed inside him. Humanity had not lost the abilities they called miracles. They had been separated from them, diminished, rendered dormant by design. He accessed what was forbidden to you. The blue beneath Dwayne brightened, casting ghostly reflections across the ancient stones. The presence spoke once more, each word carrying the finality of truth etched into bedrock. What he demonstrated were not divine exceptions. They were remnants of what your kind was once capable of. The cool blue radiance beneath Dwayne deepened into a darker shade, one so rich it resembled the night sky compressed into a single point. The atmosphere around him shifted with slow, deliberate tension, as if unseen forces were reassembling the world into a configuration capable of holding the next revelation. The air felt denser, almost metallic, carrying a faint vibration that moved through the ruins like a heartbeat buried beneath stone. There were rulers who governed the design. The words entered Dwayne's mind with the gravity of a sentence delivered after centuries of silence. His vision blurred, then expanded outward into an unfamiliar landscape. Towering structures rose before him, impossibly tall, and constructed from materials that seemed to glow from within. The architecture did not resemble anything crafted by human hands. It was geometry perfected into form, every surface alive with shifting patterns of light. 12 oversaw the shaping of your kind. A cold ripple traveled down Dwayne's spine. The scene before him sharpened. He saw 12 figures standing in a circular formation inside an immense chamber carved from obsidian-like stone. Their forms were humanoid, yet unmistakably different. Each radiated a unique frequency, colors shimmering around them like living auras. Their faces were elongated, their eyes luminous and unreadable. They communicated without speech, threads of light weaving between them like strands of thought made visible. They were not gods, though you once called them such. The chamber pulsed with energy that resonated with Dwayne's bones. The figures moved with deliberate precision, manipulating holographic structures that resembled strands of DNA interwoven with currents of light. He watched as they adjusted patterns, altering sequences, shaping something with intention far beyond human comprehension. They engineered the limits you still carry. The ruins around Dwayne trembled softly, aligning with the rhythm of the chamber he witnessed. He felt pressure building behind his eyes, the sensation of knowledge pressing to enter, but restrained by the presence's careful control. The chamber faded for a moment, revealing only the 12 silhouettes outlined against a dark horizon. They installed boundaries around your awareness, around your memory, around your potential. The air stilled completely, as though the desert itself paused to absorb the truth. These 12 were the architects of your restraints, and their design was never meant to be discovered. The chamber of the 12 faded slowly, dissolving into drifting fragments of light that blended seamlessly with the night sky above the ruins. For several moments, the desert remained frozen, as if reality itself hesitated to continue. Dwayne felt an ache spreading through his body. Not physical, but something deeper. The ache of a mind expanding beyond the limits it had always believed were absolute. The air around him thickened again, carrying the faint metallic scent that accompanied every revelation the presence delivered. They did not fear your kind, they feared only one among you. The words formed with a heaviness that settled into Dwayne's chest like a stone dropped into deep water. The ruins began to vibrate subtly, the ancient stones responding as though they remembered something long buried. The fused circle beneath him shifted colors once more, deepening into a shade of crimson that pulsed with slow, powerful intention. The 12 saw him before he was born. Dwayne's breath tightened. Images shimmered before him, fleeting and blurred, yet unmistakably profound. He saw the 12 gathered around a swirling sphere of light, each one projecting currents of energy into it. The sphere held the image of a distant world, its surface glowing with oceans of pale gold and mountains shaped like crystal spires. Within that sphere, a small point of light pulsed steadily, as though keeping time with a rhythm older than creation itself. He carried a frequency they did not weave. The presence pressed deeper into Dwayne's awareness, guiding him closer to the truth like a hand leading someone through darkness. Another image flickered into view. The 12 standing before a massive structure of shifting light, their attention fixed on a thread of luminous energy weaving its way through a tapestry of genetic patterns. That thread resisted them. It did not bend, did not merge, did not adhere to the structures they attempted to shape. They could not bind him to their architecture. The ruins trembled more violently now, as though the earth beneath them recognized the name that hovered unspoken. Dwayne felt a chill crawl across his spine, his heartbeat slowing in anticipation of the truth. When he entered the world, their design faltered. He saw glimpses of a humble dwelling illuminated by a soft glow that did not come from fire. He saw a woman with eyes full of wonder, holding an infant, whose presence seemed to radiate light that bent through the air like water. He saw men arriving with fear disguised as reverence, drawn to something they could not name but felt in the deepest parts of themselves. They recognized the disruption immediately. The presence's voice softened, though the weight of its words only grew heavier. He was beyond their calculations, beyond their influence, beyond their control. A gust of wind swept through the ruins, scattering sand across the glowing circle. The crimson pulse brightened, each wave striking the ground like an echo of something immense and ancient. The moment he began to awaken others, the 12 knew the danger he posed. Another image surfaced. Crowds gathered around him, not because of spectacle, but because something within him resonated with something long dormant within them. When he spoke, their minds stirred. When he healed, their memories trembled. When he lifted his gaze toward the heavens, the 12 felt the vibrations of their own design unraveling. They declared him a threat not because of what he did, but because of what he awakened. The truth settled into the silence like a final chord. He threatened the foundation of their control by reminding humanity of what it once was. The crimson light beneath Dwayne shifted again, darkening into a tone so deep it resembled the last glow of a dying star. The air around him contracted, drawing tight as though the world were bracing itself for a revelation that bent the boundaries of history. The ruins groaned softly, ancient stones releasing vibrations that resonated with something buried far deeper than the desert floor. Dwayne steadied himself, sensing that what came next would unravel the most sacred narrative humanity had ever built. They watched him from the moment he began to awaken memory. The words settled over the ruins like a veil. Dwayne's vision blurred, then opened into a vast chamber unlike the one of the 12. This space was darker, colder, its architecture carved from obsidian and threaded with veins of luminescent energy that pulsed with a predatory rhythm. The 12 stood in a circle once more, their forms sharper, their movements more urgent. They were not merely observing, they were reacting. They felt the disruption spreading. Images flickered before Dwayne like fragments of a torn tapestry. A village lit by firelight where people spoke in hushed awe about a man who touched the sick and left them restored. A gathering near a river where crowds waited not for spectacle but because they felt something inside them stir when he was near. A small group of followers whose eyes shone with a clarity the 12 had not anticipated, each one resonating faintly with the forgotten frequency the traveler carried. He awakened what they buried within you. The presence guided Dwayne deeper into the vision. He saw the 12 dividing into smaller groups, communicating in strands of light that formed complex patterns in the air. Their movements were sharper now, tinged with a fear that was not human but universal. They were not gods. They were architects, defending a structure that was beginning to crack. They attempted to intervene in subtle ways first. The desert around Dwayne pulsed, the wind rising as images unfolded with increasing speed. He saw whispers spreading among certain leaders. He saw institutions tightening their grip. He saw efforts to discredit, to confuse, to twist his words into something harmless. But each attempt failed, because those who heard him did not merely listen. They remembered. When he demonstrated what you were meant to be, their panic deepened. Dwayne felt a sudden heaviness in his chest as the scene shifted again. The 12 were no longer discussing. They stood unified, their energies aligned with an intensity that warped the space around them. A crystalline structure hovered in the center of their circle, its interior swirling with images from Earth. Every gesture, every word, every act of the traveler was analyzed, measured, feared. They crafted a convergence point. Dwayne sensed the presence hesitate, as if weighing how much to reveal at once. The fused circle beneath him pulsed faster, responding to the rising tension. The air tasted metallic again, filled with the charge of something irreversible. The convergence was not punishment. It was containment. The words echoed violently inside him. The images sharpened into clarity. He saw whispers in the halls of empires. He saw agreements sealed in darkness. He saw men compelled by forces they never fully understood. He saw an event approaching with the inevitability of gravity. The crucifixion was engineered as a frequency trap. The ruins shuddered, dust lifting into the air as if the desert itself recoiled at the truth. They believed that ending his physical form would collapse the resonance he carried. But they were wrong. The presence's voice softened into something almost mournful. They did not understand that ending his body only freed what they feared most. The ruins tightened once more, as if the world had exhaled sharply and forgotten how to draw its next breath. The crimson glow below Dwayne softened into a muted gold, a color that pulsed with an ancient gentleness hiding beneath unbearable truth. The presence around him grew quieter, but not weaker. It withdrew slightly, as if preparing him for something no human mind had ever been allowed to experience without shattering. When his body fell silent, their fear became certainty. The words flowed through Dwayne's consciousness like a slow tide. Immediately his vision blurred, and the desert dissolved around him. He stood suspended in a vast expanse of darkness, not empty, but filled with a faint hum that reverberated through the void like distant choral echoes. It was neither space nor time. It was something in between, a realm where form had not yet decided what it wished to be. His consciousness did not fade. A point of light appeared in the void, trembling at first, then stabilizing into a radiant sphere brighter than any star Dwayne had ever seen. It pulsed with a frequency that felt familiar, almost intimate, as though it reached into him and touched the parts of his mind that he had never known existed. Dwayne sensed that this light was not an image. It was a memory the universe itself refused to forget. He stepped out of their structure. The sphere expanded suddenly, bursting into patterns of luminous geometry that danced across the void in intricate spirals. Each spiral connected to another, forming a network of multifaceted light that pulsed like a living organism. Dwayne felt the presence guiding him closer, urging him to witness the impossible. His awareness separated without fragmentation. The light shifted again, forming a silhouette. A figure emerged, constructed not from matter, but from consciousness itself. It radiated warmth, clarity, and an overwhelming sense of recognition. Dwayne felt tears gather in his eyes without understanding why. This was not a man resurrecting. This was not a soul leaving. This was a being returning to its natural state. He became visible only to those attuned by his frequency. Scenes unfolded around the luminous figure. A familiar landscape emerged, the place where mourners had gathered around his body. But he was not bound to it. His consciousness hovered above, moving freely through layers of reality, like a traveler shifting between currents of wind. Dwayne saw others, dim lights drifting aimlessly, uncertain of their condition. When the radiant figure approached them, their lights brightened, drawn upward by recognition. He began to awaken those who were trapped between worlds. The ruins pressed faintly into Dwayne's awareness, grounding him as the vision deepened. He saw the figure descend briefly, appearing before those whose hearts resonated with his frequency. Not physically, but through a subtle bending of space, allowing them to see what others could not. He revealed that consciousness cannot be destroyed, only transformed. The void shifted again. The 12 appeared at the edge of the vision, alarm radiating from them like waves of static. They had expected collapse. Instead, they witnessed an expansion breaking through the boundaries of their architecture. His transition destabilized everything they built. The sphere of light grew so bright that it fractured the darkness, scattering shards of radiance into every direction. Each shard fell toward the world below, like seeds carried by cosmic wind. And in that moment, they realized the truth they dreaded most. Ending his body had not stopped him. It had amplified him. Dwayne felt the desert return around him, but the world no longer felt the same. The presence whispered the last words of the revelation into the trembling silence. He showed the universe what your kind truly is when unbound. The gold beneath Dwayne's feet dimmed into a pale, translucent white, as if the light itself were thinning to reveal something beneath it. The air around him shifted temperature without warning, moving from warm to cold in a single breath, the kind of cold that carried memory rather than weather. The presence curled around him like a slow-moving tide, its awareness pressing close enough to blur the edges of his thoughts. The desert wind hesitated, caught between blowing and freezing, as though the world were unsure how to proceed. The return was not a revival, it was a shift. The voice entered Dwayne's mind with a softness that contradicted the weight of the words. His surroundings dissolved again, gently this time, as though the presence was lowering him into the truth rather than forcing him toward it. The desert melted into a vast field of white light, stretching endlessly in every direction. There was no sky, no horizon, no surface beneath his feet. It was a place without distance, where movement happened without steps. He adjusted his form to match what your world could perceive. The white brightened, separating into ripples of translucent shapes that resembled silhouettes before dissolving back into light. Dwayne felt the presence guiding him through layers of reality as easily as one might turn pages in a book. He saw the luminous figure again, the one that had emerged after the body's silence. But now its form fluctuated, shifting between shapes, each one corresponding to those capable of perceiving it. Some saw a mist, some saw a shadow, some saw a radiant figure resembling the man they knew, and some saw only an overwhelming brightness that filled them with calm. He lowered his frequency so the few with awakened perception could witness him. The white surrounding Dwayne trembled, then fractured into overlapping scenes. A small room lit by oil lamps, a hillside under an early morning sky, a road traveled by two men who walked in grief. In each place, a subtle distortion grew in the air, bending the space around it. When the distortion clarified, the luminous figure appeared, though never the same way twice. To one pair of eyes he looked restored, to another he appeared as a stranger whose voice stirred recognition. To others he appeared only after their hearts shifted into stillness. They saw him not with eyes, but with memory. The presence guided Dwayne closer to the edges of the scenes. He noticed something strange. The figure did not cast shadows. The ground did not hold his weight. He was visible only within the narrow window where his frequency intersected with the observer's awareness. When that alignment wavered, the figure shimmered and vanished like a reflection on disturbed water. He demonstrated the truth they erased. Reality responds to consciousness. Form follows resonance. The light field pulsed, pulling Dwayne higher, revealing a final sequence. The radiant figure stood alone on a hillside as daylight shifted into twilight. His form began to brighten, dissolving into thin strands of luminous energy. They rose upward, weaving into the sky, until nothing remained but a faint shimmer, like heat rising from stone after sunset. He did not ascend upward. He ascended inward, into the realm they tried to keep from you. The desert returned around Dwayne, but the glow beneath him now flickered as if reflecting the last remnants of that impossible transition. He left by changing the frequency of his existence, not by leaving the world, but by moving to where the 12 could no longer reach. The pale white glow beneath Dwayne's feet darkened into a soft, pulsing amber, as if the ground itself were preparing to unveil something sacred. The desert wind stirred again but moved strangely, curling in slow spirals around him like a ribbon guided by invisible hands. The presence folded inward, tightening its awareness around him until Dwayne felt as though he stood in the center of a vast, unseen circle. The air grew dense with anticipation, carrying a quiet electricity that prickled against his skin. Before he left your world, he placed a spark within those who followed him. The words arrived wrapped in a solemn gravity that made Dwayne's breathing slow. His vision softened at the edges, and the desert melted away in a breath. He stood inside a dim chamber lit by a single flame that did not flicker despite the absence of walls or air. Around this flame were shapes, indistinct at first, then slowly forming into the silhouettes of several people kneeling in a semicircle. Their faces were blurred, as though formed of memory instead of matter. He recognized the posture of reverence, but not worship. The posture spoke of trust, of readiness, of understanding that could not be spoken aloud. He gave them what they could not receive through words. The flame brightened, stretching upward into a spiraling column of gold. From within it emerged the luminous figure, no longer shifting forms, but appearing as something both human and not. The boundary between the two dissolved by pure radiance. He raised his hand, and the air rippled like disturbed water. Dwayne felt the presence guiding him closer, urging him to witness without fear. He transferred the architecture of remembrance. The moment the figure extended both hands toward the kneeling silhouettes, thin strands of light extended from his fingertips. They touched each follower gently at the forehead. At the point of contact, a burst of white-blue energy flashed and sank beneath their skin. The silhouettes gasped without sound, their bodies trembling, their eyes glowing faintly. Dwayne felt the weight of the moment as though the energy passed through him as well, awakening a sensation deep within his chest. It was not a blessing. It was a design. The presence's voice deepened, carrying layers of meaning. Dwayne saw the followers begin to radiate soft halos of shifting color, each hue unique to the person receiving it. The room brightened as their frequencies rose, intertwining like threads in a tapestry only consciousness could weave. They were not transformed into something new. They were restored to something ancient. They received the method to ignite the dormant lineage within themselves. The chamber flooded with streaks of living light. The followers' forms blurred, then stabilized, their awareness expanding far beyond the confines of the space. Dwayne sensed what they felt: clarity, memory, and a recognition of something long forgotten. This was the teaching he guarded most, a method to awaken the architecture they tried to bury in your kind. The vision shifted abruptly. Dwayne saw the followers dispersing across the world, carrying the spark in their consciousness, prepared to ignite that same remembrance in others. Not through instruction, not through doctrine, through presence alone. He entrusted them not with belief, but with frequency. The amber glow beneath Dwayne brightened, pressing gently against his feet, as though urging him to understand the gravity of what had been revealed. The 12 feared his death, but what he gave before leaving terrified them even more. The amber glow beneath Dwayne's feet dimmed slowly, as if sinking into the earth, replaced by a deep, muted green that pulsed with a rhythm unlike any he had felt before. It was slower, heavier, almost burdened. The air around him changed temperature, dropping into a cool stillness that carried the weight of secrets buried far below the surface of the world. The presence surrounded him once more, its awareness expanding outward as if reaching into the soil beneath the ruins. There were records they hid from your world. The words entered Dwayne's consciousness with the quiet precision of a blade sliding between ancient stone. His vision darkened at the edges, not with shadow, but with depth. The desert melted away, replaced by an immense subterranean space carved from a black stone, so smooth it reflected every flicker of light. This chamber stretched farther than any human architecture could conceive, its ceiling vanishing into darkness far above. The knowledge preserved here predates your oldest civilizations. A faint green glow illuminated the chamber, revealing towering monoliths arranged in spiral formations. Each monolith was etched with symbols that shifted as Dwayne looked at them, rearranging themselves into new patterns that defied human language. The presence moved through the chamber with him, guiding his awareness along a path marked by pulses of light beneath the floor. You were never meant to see these. Dwayne approached the center of the chamber, where a massive slab of stone floated inches above the ground. It rotated slowly, revealing inscriptions that glowed with a brightness that seemed alive. The presence pressed closer, and Dwayne felt the weight of time surrounding him, heavier than any material he had ever held. These were the tablets of Enlil. The name struck Dwayne like a shockwave. The chamber responded with a low hum, as though recognizing the invocation. The floating slab brightened, illuminating rows of symbols that radiated outward like constellations. The patterns rearranged themselves into sequences that pulsed with meaning. And even without understanding their language, Dwayne felt the gravity of what they contained. They recorded the original design, the limits placed upon your kind, the predictions of your awakening, and the consequences of its timing. Images flickered through the chamber like reflections on water. He saw civilizations rising and falling under patterns engineered long before they emerged. He saw the 12 standing beside a vast sphere of light, interpreting its shifting interior like scribes reading destiny. He saw warnings etched into the stone. Warnings of disruption, warnings of fracture, warnings of a singular resonance that would appear among humanity and unravel the structure the 12 had spent millennia enforcing. They hid these tablets where your species would not find them. The chamber's light narrowed into a pathway leading deeper underground, ending in a sealed vault. Dwayne felt the presence hesitate, its awareness brushing against the vault door as though testing its integrity. The vault was moved in your century, hidden beneath a sanctuary revered by millions, guarded by those who do not know what they protect. Dwayne felt the weight of the revelation settle into him like a stone sinking into deep water. The tablets remain sealed, but the prophecy they contain has already begun. The deep green light beneath Dwayne's feet thinned into a pale, trembling silver, as though the earth itself hesitated to reveal what lay ahead. A cold current swept through the ruins, spiraling upward in a motion too deliberate to be mere wind. The presence expanded around him once more, gathering its awareness with the slow precision of a force preparing to unveil the part of truth that even the architects of humanity feared most. The awakening was foretold long before your world had language. The words settled into Dwayne's mind with the weight of prophecy. His surroundings dissolved again, but this time the shift carried a gravity he could feel in his bones. The desert melted away into an endless expanse of darkness filled with faint pinpricks of light. They were not stars. They pulsed irregularly, flickering like embers suspended in a void untouched by time. A resonance was predicted, a return of something they could not extinguish. The lights began to move, drifting toward one another until they formed an immense spiral that rotated slowly in the darkness. At the center of the spiral was a single point of brilliant gold. Each rotation of the spiral drew more light toward the center, feeding it, strengthening it. Dwayne felt the pulse of the golden point in the center through his chest, matching the rhythm of his own heartbeat, as if syncing with him. When the golden point reached its full glow, Dwayne heard the presence speak again. They feared the cycle because they could not stop it. The spiral flickered, and images began to appear within its turning rings. He saw ancient civilizations rising not with struggle, but with sudden bursts of awareness, as if remembering something long forgotten. He saw individuals across ages whose eyes glowed faintly with the same golden hue as the center of the spiral. These individuals carried something unspoken, an inner clarity that separated them from those around them. The prophecy spoke of a returning frequency. Dwayne felt the presence guide him deeper into the vision. More images formed. He saw prophets, mystics, healers, wanderers, men and women across thousands of years, each one carrying the spark that had once illuminated the traveler. They were scattered across eras, never many at one time, yet always present before moments of great change. When enough of them appeared at once, the limits imposed upon your kind would fracture. The spiral tightened, the golden center growing brighter until the surrounding void vibrated with its pulse. Dwayne felt a faint pressure behind his eyes, as though something within him responded to the frequency. The 12 feared that when the cycle returned in full strength, the architecture they created would collapse. He saw the chamber of the 12 again, but now their forms flickered in agitation. Their light wavered. They projected scenes of Earth's future, showing waves of awakening spreading across continents like rising tides. They saw structures of authority trembling, belief systems unraveling, and dormant consciousness reactivating like seeds touched by sunlight. The prophecy named this moment the returning light. The silver beneath Dwayne trembled, reacting to the words. The spiral of lights dissolved into a single, blinding burst of gold that expanded outward until everything was bathed in its glow. It begins with one, then many, then all. The presence's voice lowered to a near whisper. And the golden frequency has already returned to your world. The golden burst faded slowly, dissolving into thin strands of shimmering light that drifted downward like falling embers and vanished before touching the ground. The desert returned around Dwayne in fragments, the ruins reassembling themselves piece by piece, as though the world needed time to remember its own form. The glow beneath him shifted into a dim, trembling violet, the color of a bruise on the sky, heavy with unspoken meaning. The presence hovered close, its awareness coiled tightly, as though bracing for the most dangerous truth yet revealed. What I tell you now defies the law that governs my kind. The words didn't strike Dwayne like sound. They settled into him with a weight that made his lungs tighten. The violet glow pulsed faster, reflecting the tension carried in the presence's voice. A faint, crackling sound drifted across the ruins, the same static he'd sensed whenever the presence strained against a boundary. We are forbidden to interfere. The air grew colder, sharp enough to sting. The wind gathered at the edge of the ruins but never crossed the boundary of the glowing circle, as though held back by an invisible barrier. Dwayne felt the gravity of a rule older than Earth itself pressing down around him. We observe. We record. We do not alter the path of evolving worlds. For the first time since the encounter began, Dwayne sensed something inside the presence that resembled hesitation. Not uncertainty, but cost. A consequence measured carefully before action. Your world was sealed from our influence after the architects completed their design. The ruins darkened. Even the moon seemed to dim, as if shielding its light. Dwayne felt a coldness seep into his bones, filling him with the unsettling awareness that Earth was not simply ignored by the cosmos. It was quarantined. To reach you, I crossed a boundary that has remained unbroken for 10,000 cycles. A deep, thrumming vibration rolled across the desert floor, powerful enough to rattle the stones without disturbing the sand. Dwayne staggered slightly, but felt the presence steady him in some unseen way, holding him upright as the world trembled. My crossing will be detected. The words carried no fear, only inevitability. Dwayne felt the air shift again, as though distant forces were already searching for the breach the presence had created. A faint shimmer appeared above the ruins, like heat rising from stone, but thicker, denser, almost alive. Those who enforce the law will come, The violet glow beneath him dimmed further, almost to nothing, as if preparing to extinguish altogether. The presence drew closer, wrapping itself around Dwayne in a protective cocoon of awareness that sent chills through his entire body. "Yet I crossed because your kind reaches a turning point the architects feared." Dwayne felt his heart pound as the presence's final words sank into him like a slow falling weight. "What awakens in your world now will break the system they built. You must know the truth, even if my existence is the cost." The ruins fell silent. The violet glow died, and the air trembled as if reality itself had taken a step back, waiting for whatever would come next. The violet light that had pulsed beneath Dwayne's feet faded completely, leaving only the faintest outline of the fused circle etched into the desert floor. The world seemed drained of color. The air grew still and cold, not with the quiet of night, but with the hush of something watching from beyond the veil of perception. Dwayne felt a pressure around him, subtle yet undeniable, like the atmosphere thickened in response to an invisible presence far greater than the one he had been speaking with. "Others detect my crossing." The words arrived in fragments, as though traveling through interference. Dwayne sensed strain in the presence's voice for the first time. Not weakness, resistance. The ruins trembled, a faint vibration moving through the stones like a warning ripple. The sky above flickered, stars bending ever so slightly from their positions, as if space itself were tightening its grip. Time narrows. Listen. The ground beneath Dwayne warmed again, but not from light, from urgency. An energy field expanded around him briefly, like a soft veil settling over his skin, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. He understood instinctively that whatever the presence was about to reveal was meant for him alone. You stand at a boundary of choice that will shape more than your own life. The desert darkened. Not visually, but in sensation. Dwayne felt as though he stood at the center of a vast crossroads leading in directions he could not see. The presence enveloped him, its awareness forming a circle around his consciousness, isolating him from the external tremors gathering at the edge of reality. "You may carry the truth and speak it." Dwayne's pulse quickened. The presence did not elaborate immediately. Instead, it allowed the enormity of the statement to settle over him like dust stirred from ancient stone. His mind flooded with images of chaos, disbelief, upheaval, awakening, and fear. The presence sensed his reaction and gently steadied it. "But you must understand the cost." A cold wind swept across the ruins, cutting through the silence with a sharp, unnatural whistle. Dwayne felt it pass through him rather than around him, leaving a trail of goosebumps in its wake. "If you reveal what you have seen, the structure of your world will fracture." The wind stopped. A new stillness followed, deeper than silence, as though the earth itself held its breath. Belief systems will collapse. Institutions will crumble. The boundaries that hold your societies together will weaken. Dwayne felt his heart thud heavily in his chest. The presence pressed closer, its tone shifting to something both solemn and compassionate. "And yet, that collapse may be necessary." A dim shimmer formed at the far edge of the ruins, faint but growing. Dwayne sensed it was the first sign of the enforcers approaching, drawn toward the breach like moths to flame. "The other path is silence." The shimmer brightened. The presence continued. "If you choose silence, your world will continue its path unchanged, order preserved, structure maintained, but awakening delayed for generations." The shimmer flickered violently, as though the veil between realities stretched thin. "Only you may choose." The presence wrapped its final words around Dwayne like a mantle, heavy and sacred. "Speak and ignite the awakening, or remain silent and protect the world from its own unraveling." The ruins quivered, the sky tightened, and Dwayne stood alone on the threshold of a decision that no human had ever been asked to bear. The The shimmer at the edge of the ruins intensified, expanding into a thin curtain of distortion that bent the air like heat rising from desert stone. But this was no natural distortion. Its movements were too deliberate, too synchronized, as though responding to a signal only beings outside the human spectrum could perceive. Dwayne felt the presence retreat slightly, not out of fear, but preparation, like a sentinel repositioning itself before a final exchange. You must see what he wished your kind to remember. The voice arrived softer than before, but steadier, as if carving a protected space within the tightening boundaries of reality. The shimmer flared brighter, pressing inward. The ruins shook. The earth quivered. The stars above dimmed as though something massive hovered beyond the sky, drawing closer with each passing moment. The presence wrapped Dwayne in a thin film of awareness, shielding him just enough to withstand what was coming next. The truth he carried was not born of rebellion. It was born of remembrance. The desert dissolved around Dwayne in a liquid ripple. Darkness replaced it, but not an emptiness. A warm, living darkness, dense with layers of unspoken memory. Then a soft glow bloomed in front of him, expanding until he stood in a vast expanse of light shaped not by form but by consciousness itself. The presence guided him forward, not moving his body but moving his awareness like a hand ushering light through water. He wanted your kind to recall what the architects tried to erase. A shape formed within the glow, not a physical man, but the imprint of one, built from luminous strands that flowed like currents of gold. The silhouette pulsed, growing clearer, not with details of face or body, but with the unmistakable resonance of recognition. Dwayne felt a pressure in his chest, not painful, but profound, as if something ancient within him leaned forward to listen. You know him not by name, but by frequency. The golden form brightened. Waves of energy rippled outward from its center, each one gentle yet immense, carrying warmth deep into Dwayne's bones. As the waves passed through him, he felt a memory stir. Not from his life, but from something dormant and ancestral. A memory that belonged to humanity itself. He spoke of a kingdom not of this world. You believed it meant a realm beyond death. It never did. The presence allowed the truth to settle before continuing. He spoke of the original state of your kind. A state before the 12 reshaped you. A state where consciousness could mold reality. Where form responded to thought. Where awareness extended beyond the limits of flesh. The golden form shifted, releasing another wave of energy that shimmered like liquid sunlight. He came to awaken that memory within you. The shimmer at the edge of the ruins flashed again, violently this time, sending a silent shockwave through the vision. The golden silhouette flickered, struggling to remain stable as forces outside the realm pressed inward. The enforcers draw near. The presence tightened around Dwayne, shielding him as the golden figure raised its head, its form trembling under the pressure of intrusion. Yet its radiance grew brighter, burning through the darkness until Dwayne felt the heat of recognition deep inside him. He left a message for those ready to remember. The figure opened like a blooming star, releasing a final pulse of light that struck Dwayne's awareness with the force of revelation. Your kind was never meant to worship. You were meant to remember. The vision buckled, the golden figure fractured into shards of light. The presence pulled Dwayne out of the collapsing realm just as the shimmer tore through the ruins like a silent storm. And the truth he now carried burned within him like a spark, waiting to ignite the world. The desert snapped back around Dwayne with a force that felt like being pulled through the eye of a storm. The ruins trembled beneath his feet, the air alive with currents of electricity that crackled soundlessly along the edges of broken stone. Above him, the sky twisted into unfamiliar constellations, as though the universe itself was rearranging its map. The shimmer that had hovered at the boundary of the ruins now expanded violently, stretching into a vast veil of distortion that rippled like liquid glass. Something was crossing through. They arrive. The presence's voice no longer carried calm. It carried inevitability. The weight of cosmic law pressed into the desert, and Dwayne felt it as a heavy pressure behind his eyes, as if reality were shrinking around him. The glow beneath his feet flickered weakly, as though the ground itself struggled to support the truth he carried. The shimmer ruptured. They emerged without footsteps, without form, without sound. Their presence was a distortion, a gravitational bending of the space around them. The desert darkened as they approached, the air compressing with each ripple they sent forward. There were several of them, but they did not resemble beings. They resembled voids, shapes defined by the absence of light, each one radiating an authority that resonated through the physical and the unseen. They enforced the silence. The presence folded itself protectively around Dwayne, its awareness wrapping him like an invisible barrier. The enforcers halted at the edge of that barrier, the air between them crackling with tension that felt like the tautness of a wire drawn to its breaking point. Dwayne could not see their faces. He could not see their eyes, but he could feel their intent. They were not malevolent. They were not merciful. They were order. He has seen what was forbidden. The statement did not come from one of the enforcers. It echoed through the air itself, vibrating within Dwayne's bones. The presence responded with a single resonant pulse, not attacking, not resisting, simply acknowledging. The atmosphere tightened until the desert seemed to fold inward, waiting for the next sound. He cannot unsee. Silence followed, a silence so deep it felt like falling. Then, something changed. The enforcers dimmed, as though withdrawing into themselves. The presence brightened, expanding its field around Dwayne until he felt his entire consciousness lifted, steadied, held firm against the crushing weight. The choice is now his. The enforcers receded slightly, creating a narrow passage of stillness between them. The presence spoke one final time, its voice no longer immense, but intimate. You may reveal the truth and shatter the structure built around your kind, or remain silent and allow your world to sleep a little longer. The shimmering veil began to collapse. The enforcers dissolved into the night. The presence's warmth faded like the last ember of a great fire. And Dwayne stood alone in the ruins, carrying a truth older than the civilizations beneath his feet, a truth powerful enough to unravel the stories of gods and the architecture of humanity itself. The desert fell silent, and the world waited for his decision.